So I wanted, before we get started, to let everyone know that I have a new podcast out, and it's called Meditations. If you like the Meditations segment of this current podcast, you'll like the Meditations podcast. It's nothing but 20 minutes of meditative sounds. And now, on with the podcast.
Americans love scenery. We want to see it all, from one coast to the next, Mount Rushmore down to the Everglades. So hop into a Chevy Malibu and take the scenic route. It's the car you knew America could build. There's a place where people count on friendships they can trace back generations, where they can count on the same stool at the coffee shop waiting for them every morning. This place is called Glen Ellen, and you can find it in every bottle of Glen Ellen wine. This is craft brewed Herman Joseph's, the smoothest, easiest drinking specialty beer in the entire solar system. And I believe you'll find drinkable in the dictionary right after don't order a beer you can't drink. Zoingo! Boingo! The freestyle pogo with more boing, more bounce. Bounce further, bounce higher with Zoingo Boingo. To see what makes Arrowhead Mountain Spring water different from those other waters, you have to go back to the source. And with Arrowhead, that means going back a little farther and longer than most. Between security challenged and security strengthened, there's one important word: how. And it is the how that makes all the difference to our nation and our world. Lockheed Martin. We never forget who we're working for. What makes Kraft Singles so good? 2 out of every 3 kids don't get the recommended amount of calcium. But with Kraft Singles, they get a good source of calcium and the taste they love. Kraft Singles. Magic every single time. Throw boring overboard with a new real meal from Long John Silver's. A meal worthy of a plate. Just $4.99. Only at Long John Silver's. We may not all be geniuses, but we can all do something smart. Introducing the Hyundai 199 Sonata Lease. It's a smart deal on a really smart car.
You gotta own it, though. That's what the younger generation does. They own it. You know, they just own everything about themselves. It's so interesting, just because, like, you talk to some of these young kids, man, and they'll proudly tell you, they're like, listen, I'm pansexual, I'm neurodivergent, right? Which is just so interesting, just because, like, back when I was growing up, you tried really hard to not be a gay retard. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm glad you can be who you are. I'm just saying, times are changing, because now you go up to a kid like, you're a fucking gay retard. They'll be like, oh my God, thank you for noticing. I really appreciate that.
Good morning. It's Friday, Evil Friday, May the 30th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have the headlines, patriotic shorts, motivation, Bishop Barron, Ayn Rand, and the marketing of evil. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I should not change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Thank you. And now the headlines for Friday, May the 30th. Trump's tariffs are back in effect after appeals court ruling. A Canadian man was arrested at Miami International Airport after punching multiple TSA agents after being removed from a flight the day before. MSNBC replaced Rachel Maddow with Jen Psaki because they were losing so many viewers. And on her debut, she lost 53% more viewers than did Maddow. Former NYPD Commissioner, national security expert Bernie Kerik, dead at 69. 9-year-old Maryland girl finds 15-million-year-old megalodon tooth in the Chesapeake Bay. Monica Crowley is officially sworn in as ambassador and chief of protocol of the United States. And those are the headlines for Friday, May the 30th. Back in a minute.
Thank you. And now I read the book, The Sovereign Child, so usually on Saturdays. I read the book. And here's a review of the book on, I believe it's on X. And it says, quote, "This is horrible advice. There's a part or two about emotions and how they're signals for something, and you can use them, but outside of that, it's going to ruin your kids. I've seen kids who end up being hopeless, lost, burdens on society and their parents due to this kind of freedom. It's not about ruling with an iron fist, but you sure as hell need to give your kids structure and boundaries to work within. You also have to pass on the traditions and rituals that made you successful and that requires discipline. If everyone did what's in this book, we'd go back to the Stone Age," unquote. And the only critique I have of that is he posted that under Mr. Stipple's X page. And if you're going to critique somebody on social media, you should do it on your own page. So, but that's to let you know, I agree with what he's saying in general, not necessarily every word that he was talking about there. I don't know about returning to the Stone Age, but it can't be good for kids to just let them do whatever the heck they want. So, but like I said, I read that because I agree with it in principle. So I read the book itself because I want everybody else to know as well, and basically remind myself this is what the left is up to. One of the reasons that they do this kind of thing is to sacrifice their children for the greater good. That's what they believe that they're doing. And shame on them. Back in a minute.
Thank you. And now, the patriotic short.
The Republic F-105 Thunder Chief, known to its crews as the Thud, was a cornerstone of U.S. Air Force strike capability during the early Cold War and Vietnam War. Designed in the 1950s as a supersonic fighter bomber, it was initially conceived to deliver a nuclear payload at low altitude, reaching speeds of Mach 2. With a 14,000-pound payload and a 20mm Vulcan cannon, the F-105D variant became the Air Force's primary tactical strike aircraft. The largest single-seat, single-engine combat aircraft of its era, it flew over 20,000 sorties in Vietnam, facing intense enemy defenses. Despite its versatility, the Thunder Chief suffered heavy losses. We will look at the F-105's development, its critical role in Vietnam, and its evolution into a wild weasel platform, remembering a pivotal chapter in military aviation history.
And that was the patriotic short. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now I so desperately need to get motivated.
You don't become what you want. You become where your habits take you.
Nothing's ever going to be given to you. Everything's going to be earned. If you don't go out there and put in the work, you don't go out and put in the effort, one, you're not going to get the results. But two, and more importantly, you don't deserve it. You didn't earn it.
There's certain things you want out of life. You want the finest things, but you're not willing to work for them. You cry about you don't get this opportunity, you don't get this break, but you're not positioning yourself. And you're still trying to get a handout. You gotta work. It wouldn't be fair if just anybody could just get a degree and not have to work. Because guess what it would mean? It would mean your degree is worth nothing. If other people didn't have to work hard, didn't have to sweat, didn't have to stay up all night, didn't have to do research, didn't have to go to the library, didn't have to sacrifice sleep, didn't have to make sacrifices in life, if everybody just threw out degrees, they wouldn't be worth anything.
You see, the only difference between the one who quits and the one who doesn't is that they showed up every day. They worked hard every day. They hustled every day. They improved every day. They did all this even though they felt like quitting every day.
You putting in the work, and the only reason you pissed, the only reason you quit is not because you want to quit, because you keep looking up and you saying we 3 in, who cares what you are? If you keep going, you're going to break through. The only people that don't break through are the people who scoreboard watching. That's the problem with some of y'all. You stopping working to look at yourself. You're not grinding. You glaring. You should be grinding and you looking at the score. The score is what it is. The score ain't about to change because you looked at it. Keep playing the game. Keep grinding. Keep working. And that other stuff will take care of itself. Wake up every single day. And if the opportunity to work out is there, work out. If the opportunity is there to read, read. Because you got to tell the flesh who's in control. I'm in control. You're not in control. I know you don't want to wake up. You don't have an option. Get out. We trying to eat. There's a certain lifestyle we want.
You look at any person who's done anything great in this world, they've had to be fully committed. Any goal that you want to achieve that's worthwhile in your life requires you to go all the in. I mean, jump the in the pool, head first, don't worry about the what ifs, and make yourself swim.
We're all being tested, and that road to success is a bumpy ass road. Has potholes, nails, detours, and shit. A lot of you are gonna die with a nicely preserved body. No plates, no bad knees, no bruises, no scars. You also have an empty resume. Don't be afraid to get scars. The scars show your willingness to get to the other side. They show your failures. They show your willingness to start from scratch. They show what you're willing to do to go the distance, to see what you're capable of.
And there's a big difference between 99 and 100%. And to find that last 1%, it takes ignoring your personal desires and comforts. If you're able to endure when all around you says stop, you will find that 1%.
It's a commitment, not a feeling. When you get up in the morning, you don't give yourself a choice. You grind, no matter what.
When you're just not feeling it, you gotta force yourself. When your feelings tell you no, you tell them to shut the fuck up. You don't want to get up and get out of bed, you get up and get the fuck out of bed. You don't want to study, you fucking study. You don't want to get to work, you get to fucking work. When everything in you is kicking and screaming, you have to take control and tell yourself, I do not stop.
I'm not gonna sit around and wait for good things to happen to me. I'm gonna grind. I'm gonna fight. I'm gonna do everything in my power to become the very best version of me.
When you do the things most people aren't willing to do, you'll live the life most people never will. When you look back after working your ass off, you will see every challenge, all the knockdowns, breakdowns, and every bit of the pain and daily struggle will all be fucking worth it.
And that was a little bit of motivation. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. Thank you. And now a little bit of meditation. And that was a little bit of meditation. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now the Daily Stoic.
Dealing with pain. Whenever you suffer pain, keep in mind that it's nothing to be ashamed of, and that it can't degrade your guiding intelligence, nor keep it from acting rationally and for the common good. And in most cases, you should be helped by the saying of Epicurus that pain is never unbearable or unending, so you can remember these limits and not add to them in your imagination. Remember, too, that many common annoyances are pain in disguise, such as sleepiness, fever, and loss of appetite. When they start to get you down, tell yourself you are giving in to pain. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations 7.64. In 1931, on a trip to New York City, Winston Churchill was struck crossing the street by a car going more than 30 miles an hour. A witness at the scene was sure that he had been killed. He would spend some 8 days in the hospital with cracked ribs and a severe head wound. Churchill somehow retained consciousness. When he spoke to the police, he went to great lengths to insist that he was completely to blame and wanted no harm to come to the driver. Later, the driver came to visit Churchill at the hospital. When Churchill heard that the driver was out of work, he tried to offer him, the man who had nearly killed him, some money. More than his own pain, he was worried that the publicity from the accident would hurt the man's job prospects and sought to help how he could. Nature is merciful, he later wrote in a newspaper article about the experience, and does not try her children, man or beast, beyond their compass. It is only where the cruelty of man intervenes that hellish torments appear. For the rest, live dangerously. Take things as they come. Dread naught. All will be well. In the years to come, Churchill and the world would witness some of the most hellish torments that man could invent. Yet he, along with many of our ancestors, endured that pain as well. As horrible as it was, eventually all would be well again. Because, like Epicurus says, nothing is unending. You just need to be strong and gracious enough to get through it.
And that was the Daily Stoic. And now, His Excellency, Bishop Robert Barron.
I don't think we talk enough about the Holy Spirit, even though, of course, we mention and we honor and we worship the Holy Spirit, that we don't speak sufficiently of this third person of the Trinity. And there might be some truth to that. See, when you get in touch with the Holy Spirit, you're getting in touch with the love that connects the Father and the Son. You're getting in touch with the love that God is, and therefore with the very force that gave rise to the universe. So at the risk of sounding a little bit cosmic and grandiose, you're in touch with the most powerful force imaginable. You want power. I mean the real thing. Surrender your life over to the Holy Spirit. Say, Lord, look, it's not what I want. It's not my projects and plans. It's your projects and plans. You will find you will tap into this source of power to change things for good, change things for the better in your life, in your family, in your place of work. Surrender by a conscious act to the Spirit, and you unleash this great driving wind. Everything.
And that was His Excellency, Bishop Robert Barron. And now, the Ayn Rand thought of the day. Quote, the only actual factor required for the existence of free competition is the unhampered, unobstructed operation of the mechanism of a free market. The only action which a government can take to protect free competition is laissez-faire, which, in free translation, means hands off, unquote. And that was Ayn Rand from the chapter America's Persecuted Minority, Big Business, from the book Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the gaslighting section. 8 signs of an authentic person. Genuine people, they respect everyone. Fake people, they only respect people with power. Genuine people, they admire others and often praise others. Fake people, they criticize others to make themselves look great. Genuine people express their opinions openly. Fake people gossip a lot. Genuine people are nice and helpful most of the time. Fake people are only nice when they have a hidden agenda. Genuine people don't brag. Fake people show off all the time. Genuine people don't try to make people like them. Fake people try hard to make people like them. And genuine people always try their best to live up to their promises, while fake people make commitments easily but seldom keep them. And those are the 8 signs of an authentic person. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, a little bit of Maria and then Stu.
Full interview with JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon. Varney and Company picks it up now. Stu, take it away.
Good morning, Maria, and good morning, everyone. A post from the president on Truth Social has upset the market. He says, no more Mr. Nice Guy with China. He says he helped China by pausing tariffs, but China totally violated its agreement with us. Okay. He's not happy with China. Separately, Treasury Secretary Bessent says China trade talks are stalled. Now, when Trump posted on Truth Social, stocks turned negative, and they're still negative. The Dow's off about 120 points, small loss for the S&P, NASDAQ down 70. Bitcoin, we have at $105,000 a share, still there, 105.7. Interest rates, well, they're down a little. The 10-year coming in at 4.43, the 2-year coming in at 3.95. And we have another inflation indicator. It's the personal consumption expenditure measure, the PCE. In the last 12 months, it has gone up 2.1%. That means inflation is softening just a little. Personal income, however, that went up a very sharp 0.8%, the best gain since 2021. The president is in action today. He holds a news conference this afternoon when Elon Musk serves his last day in government, and he'll visit Pennsylvania, pushing the new relationship between U.S. Steel, Nippon Steel, and the U.S. government. This is Trump's industrial policy. He has an interest rate policy, too. Trump invited Fed Chair Powell to the White House and told him, hey, you're making a mistake not cutting rates now. We don't know how Powell will respond. Politics. The Wall Street Journal says an unknown individual pretended to be Susie Wiles, that's Trump's chief of staff. The impersonator may have used AI to mimic Wiles' voice. That's a threat we're all going to face. Joe Biden, under very close scrutiny for any role she played in covering up her husband's decline. White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt says the former First Lady is still lying. That's her words, and should speak up before Congress. One last one. The New York Knicks won last night. 2 more wins and they're in the NBA Finals. New York sports bars are in prayer mode. It is Friday, May 30th, 2025. Varney
and that was Stuart Varney, again, relishing all the conflict because it brings the ratings up and makes profits for Fox News. Non-profit news now. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, what does the phrase, if you're explaining, you're losing, mean? This was said by Ronald Reagan, speaking of political campaigns. From the perspective of your audience, if you have to explain yourself, you come off looking desperate to convince. As a consequence, you lose the high ground. From a more philosophical perspective, if you have a clear conscience and strong conviction towards the positions you take, your values, truth, and direction, you don't need the opinions or consent of others. As a consequence, you don't need to explain yourself. However, if you yourself are not convinced of the validity and truth of your position, or you can't fully justify your choices, then you continue to expel words in an attempt to create the illusion of certainty. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now the preamble to the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now from a book that's called Good Inside. What's the opposite of understanding? For this argument's sake, it's convincing. Convincing is the attempt to prove a singular reality, to prove that only one thing is true. Convincing is an attempt to be right, and as a result make the other person wrong. It rests on the assumption that there's only one correct viewpoint. And then my question is this supposed to be convincing? Further, convincing has one goal in mind, being right. And here's the unfortunate consequence of being right. The other person feels unseen and unheard, at which point most people become infuriated and combative, because it feels as if the other person does not accept your realness or worth. Feeling unseen and unheard makes connection impossible. Understanding two things are true and convincing one thing is true are diametrically opposed ways of approaching other people, so a powerful first step in any interaction is to notice which mode you're in. When you're in one thing is true mode, you're judgmental of and reactive to someone else's experience because it feels like an assault on your own truth. As a result, you will seek to prove your own point of view, which in turn makes the other person defensive because they need to uphold the realness of their experience. In one thing is true mode, exchanges escalate quickly. Each person thinks they're arguing about the content of the conversation when in fact they're trying to defend that they are a real, worthy person with a real, truthful experience. And again, is this convincing? Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the marketing of evil.
Chapter 4, Multicultural Madness. How Western culture was turned upside down in one generation. This is a true story about America. About how the magnificent Judeo-Christian culture of my youth, which represented the hope of liberty for the world's oppressed, was so easily turned into mush in my lifetime. Let me begin with a brief story about my father. When he was only 3 years old, my dad was sentenced to death. That's right. The Turkish government was engaged in a deliberate campaign to force him, his mother, and his infant sister, along with hundreds of thousands of other Armenians, into the Syrian desert, where they would die of starvation, disease, or worse, torture and death at the hands of brutal soldiers or roving bandits. It was 1915, at the peak of Islamic Turkey's gruesome, premeditated genocide of the Christian Armenian population in that country. Those not butchered outright were driven into the desert to perish. My father's father, a doctor, had been forced into the Turkish army against his will to head a medical regiment. Shortly before my dad died in 1988, he told me one of his earliest recollections. I was not quite 3 years old at the time, he said. The wagon we were in had tipped over, my hand was broken and bloody, and Mother was looking for my infant sister who had rolled away. The next thing I remember after that, Mother was on a horse, holding my baby sister, and had me sitting behind her saying, "Hold on tight or the Turks will get you." My father and grandmother escaped, but his baby sister, his father, and about 1.5 million other Armenians perished at the hands of the brutal Turkish regime, the 20th century's first genocide. So what did my father and grandmother do? They did what millions of persecuted people have done. They made the long voyage to the one country that welcomed them and offered them freedom and an opportunity for a new life, the most blessed nation on earth, their promised land, America. Life wasn't easy in this new land, but both mother and son managed to overcome many obstacles, learned English eagerly, built a life for themselves, went to college, and pursued careers. Dad got married and had a family. I was the middle of 3 children, growing up in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. He provided for us, protected us, worried about us, loved us. He also rose to the top of his chosen profession, aeronautical engineering, becoming the Army's chief scientist for ballistic missile defense. He lived a good and full life in a blessed land. That's just one story, my dad's story. Now multiply that by millions of similar cases of dispossessed and persecuted people coming to America, and you'll start to have an idea of what America has long represented to the world. He was born Greek-Armenian, but my dad became an American, as did thousands of other Armenians fleeing the genocide, as did Jews fleeing the Nazi Holocaust, Chinese seeking freedom from totalitarianism, Vietnamese and Cambodians escaping from their war-ravaged land, and countless others coming to America for a better life, starting with the English pilgrims that came here to escape religious persecution. In short, the huddled masses yearning to breathe free have come to these shores from every land, speaking every language, but all wanting to become Americans. Inscribed in bronze at the base of the Statue of Liberty, Emma Lazarus's transcendent 1883 poem, The New Colossus, captures the spirit of America's amazing generosity. Do you remember it from your school days? Here at our sea-washed sunset gates shall stand a mighty woman with a torch whose flame is the imprisoned lightning, and her name, Mother of Exiles. The poem goes on to quote those shining words, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door." There has always been something different about America that enabled this great nation to wrap her arms around the wretched refuse of other lands. This nation of immigrants was bound together by a spirit, you might say. For although one cannot become French or Chinese or Russian, one can become an American by embracing that spirit. Becoming a naturalized American citizen therefore meant more than passing the federal government screening process. It meant an implicit and heartfelt agreement to abide not just by the nation's laws, but by its hidden, unwritten laws as well. The principles that made up the invisible fabric of Western civilization: equality under the law, unlimited opportunity to succeed or fail, independence and self-reliance, tolerance, and so on. Underlying all of this, there was a belief so deep and unquestionable that it underpinned all of our major institutions, that there is a God, that he is the God of the Bible, that the 10 Commandments and the Sermon on the Mount are the foundation of a good life in a great society, and that America had been uniquely blessed by that God. These were the underlying assumptions infusing America's dominant culture. All that began to change in the 1960s. Actually, the nation's moral and cultural foundation had been under attack for decades, but the 60s is when the attacks spilled out into America's streets, resulting in unprecedented cultural chaos by decade's end. One of the first times I remember feeling the foundations of America tremble was in 1964 during my 9th grade civics class. A girl, I don't remember her name, but I think she was from Tennessee, and she had a very thick Southern accent, answered a question from the teacher by mentioning something about God. "How do you know there is a God?" the teacher shot back. It was like an earth tremor, just a faint quiver, really, a precursor to the tidal waves to come a few years later, a smiling, casual, offhanded swipe at the world as we knew it. How did the little Southern girl know there was a God? Clearly taken aback, she answered the teacher earnestly, incredulously, her voice breaking, "Because there is." She had, quite naturally, offered up the best answer anyone could possibly give. The teacher had questioned the unquestionable, injecting doubt into a room of impressionable young boys and girls. It was one of those moments you remember 40 years later because it created a spark, a momentary contact with another dimension, that alien dimension of cynicism and disbelief. Within a few years, the gathering tides of rebellion against traditional America came crashing down with great ferocity and on many shores. One key area was the civil rights movement. Despite the fact that America had long since forsaken slavery, and thanks to the movement led by Martin Luther King Jr., had outlawed segregation and made great strides in moving beyond racism altogether, a demand for black studies nevertheless arose in the nation's colleges. The idea was that past mistreatment of blacks required special emphasis on their culture and accomplishments. Black pride was born, and black studies, black history, and the like proliferated through the nation's university campuses. However, while most people didn't comprehend it at the time, black pride and similar liberation movements did not arise out of the mainstream of the civil rights movement. Far from it. Remember, in his famous I Have a Dream speech, Martin Luther King Jr. had championed the obvious solution to racism, the colorblind society, where people would not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. But that enlightened vision of America was hijacked by forces of the 60s radical left. These were people who did not want peace and racial harmony. They condemned racial integration as Uncle Tomism. Their aim was to indict America as a racist oppressor, as a means to bring about division, revolution, and societal transformation. But all this was off the radar of most Americans who, under the sway perhaps of the nation's collective guilt over slavery and segregation, accepted what amounted to radical black studies. It didn't end there, however. Soon there were women's studies and gay and lesbian studies. Before long, the world of academia was awash in something called multiculturalism. Wait a minute, you might say. What's wrong with multiculturalism? Doesn't exposing students to other cultures and values serve to enrich their understanding of the world and its peoples? Of course, and there would be nothing wrong if that were actually what was going on. However, as Judge Robert Bork explained in Slouching Towards Gomorrah, multiculturalism had been conjured up solely to serve as a battering ram, a philosophy of antagonism to America and the West, an attack on America, the European American culture, and the white race, with special emphasis on white males. To fathom what's been happening to America, you must understand that during the 1960s, the moral foundation of America came under a full-blown assault. The radicals of the 60s have today either taken over or profoundly altered the key institutions they originally wanted to destroy, from government to the news media, from education to religion. A generation later, the various liberation movements, sexual liberation, women's liberation, gay liberation, and so on, have blossomed into rampant infidelity, divorce and family breakdown, gender confusion, AIDS, abortion, and other huge problems. Moreover, the multicultural madness that started in the 60s has infused virtually all of American society with unending confusion. Today, in the rarefied but toxic air of multiculturalism and political correctness, all cultures and all values are of equal value. The most ignorant, oppressive, suffocating, women-hating kind of culture, where people's hands and feet are amputated as punishment for petty offenses, is now worthy of equal respect to Western culture, which has provided most of the world's knowledge, progress, food, medicine, technology, quality of life, representative government, and liberty. This moral inversion, which proclaims that all cultures are equal, has extended to virtually every area of society. For instance, all religions are equal. Witches and Satanists are now afforded the same respect as Christians and Jews. As just one example, the U.S. District Court judge in Chesterfield County, Virginia, ruled in 2003 that officials discriminated against a witch when they barred her from opening the Board of Supervisors meeting with prayer. Britain's Royal Navy went a step further, allowing an officer to conduct satanic rituals on board one of its ships. The 24-year-old naval technician and non-commissioned officer of the frigate Cumberland was given his own satanic altar where he could dress in black robes and perform ceremonies to worship the devil using bells and candles. As with religion, where good and evil now are afforded equal respect, all sexuality is now equal. In 2004, thousands of same-sex marriage ceremonies were conducted throughout the United States, in open defiance of the law, under the banner of fundamental fairness and non-discrimination. Even adult child sex, euphemistically called intergenerational sex, is making surprising headway into the mainstream based on today's climate of moral equivalence among all forms of consensual relationships. Self-righteous pedophiles claim their cause is simply the latest in a long line of civil rights movements, and they eagerly anticipate the day society will shed its ancient taboos and grant full sexual rights to young children and the adults who love them. This worldview, whereby we declare all human cultures and moral codes from the fairest to the foulest to be equal in value, is made possible only by the total abandonment of any objective standard of right and wrong. The absurdity of this becomes even more evident when we take the next step downward in making everything equal to everything else. I'm talking about a major outgrowth of multiculturalism, namely the radical animal rights movement. Think about this statement: a rat is a pig, is a dog, is a boy. Ingrid Newkirk, founder of the world's largest animal rights organization, the 600,000-member People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, made this amazing pronouncement to Vogue magazine. How, you may be wondering, can anyone equate a boy with a rat? A close look at the radical animal rights movement is highly instructive in understanding multicultural madness. By the way, I say radical so as not to confuse these zealots with the good folks at the Humane Society. Elevating animals to the level of human beings is a roundabout way of saying that human beings are no more than animals and therefore have no souls. Indeed, for some people, there is great satisfaction and liberation in believing humans are just soulless animals. You see, if there is no soul, there is no God. And if there is no God, there's no divine judgment, no accountability for our actions. You get the picture. We're animals, so we can act like animals. We're autonomous, unfettered by conscience, gods of our own lives, free to follow our basest instincts. And it's all okay, because we're just animals. So you see, the radical animal rights folks are just cross-species multiculturalists. Do you think the multiculturalists really care about Eskimo music or about why the Ubangis make their lips as big as pancakes? Do they really care about cultures that worship rats, cows, and sex organs? No, their interest is not truly in elevating other cultures, nor in celebrating diversity. They simply want to reject moral constraints. In the same way, people who equate boys with rats don't really care for rats. No, their interest is in tearing down Western civilization and denying its foundation, namely the moral laws of life bequeathed to mankind by God. By equating man with a soulless animal, they've negated, in their minds, the existence of any divine authority or judge over their lives, and thus they feel liberated from the patriarchal, law-giving Judeo-Christian God they're rebelling against. It's easy to blame 60s radicals, university Marxists, cowardly politicians, and an elitist press for today's multicultural madness. But the fact is, millions of Americans have bought into it. Why? Isn't it obvious? Since the 1960s, America has steadily fallen away from the Judeo-Christian values that previously illuminated and gave life and strength to the nation's institutions. This is equivalent to turning out the country's lights. And when you turn out the lights, everything looks the same in the dark. That's multiculturalism. No longer guided by universal standards of right and wrong, Americans have had nothing more reliable than their own feelings to guide them in the moral realm. And as modern marketing knows so well, when people are operating primarily on the basis of feelings, they're wide open to every sort of manipulation imaginable. Marketing has been called the application of the knowledge of human psychology to the task of persuasion. And what psychology has taught the marketing world is that the most powerful persuasion of all takes place not through above-the-board appeals to reason, but by directly targeting the emotions. To illustrate, cigarettes were once sold on the basis of great taste and fine tobacco. Not all that convincing, but then there aren't a whole lot of benefits to sell with cigarettes. Then along came the Marlboro Man, probably the most famous brand image to appear in our lifetimes. The rugged, masculine trademark made Marlboro the world's best-selling cigarette. Now, what exactly does the Marlboro Man, a rancher on a horse, have to do with cigarettes? Nothing at all, except that the cowboy image evoked within millions of men feelings of masculinity, independence, wide-open spaces, and freedom. So successful has been this decades-old campaign that on some ads, the image is reduced to little more than a saddle and a splash of red, but like Pavlov's bell, it still subtly makes people salivate for the mythical place called Marlboro country. For the last generation, marketing has aimed not so much at extolling the actual value or usefulness of a product, but rather at conditioning the consumer to associate the product with a particular feeling. Bottom line, if the marketer can bring forth within you a feeling, the right feeling, he has won. Game over. With this principle in mind, let's look at how the public is so easily persuaded to abandon long-held loyalties. How, for instance, are our former sentiments opposing homosexuality or Wicca so easily transformed into enlightened tolerance and open support? Pick a topic. Let's say same-sex marriage. Imagine you're participating in a televised one-on-one debate. You're defending traditional marriage. Facing off against you is a lesbian, but not just any lesbian, an attractive, young, well-spoken, well-dressed, and personable lesbian, and to all appearances a fine human being. She looks you in the eye and says, in a disarmingly mainstream and reasonable tone, "I love my country. I obey its laws, and I pay my taxes. I'm an American, and I have the same rights you do. In fact, I've served my country in the military and have put my life on the line. I've lived monogamously with my partner for 18 years. We truly love each other and want nothing more than to be married and to live out our lives in peace and happiness, just like you. What's the matter with that? Why shouldn't we be allowed to be married? How does it hurt you?" Okay, you have 30 seconds to respond before the commercial break. How can you neutralize the powerful, positive emotions your opponent has skillfully evoked? Will you offer up a statement about the dangers of altering the traditional definition of marriage? Will you point out that children do better with both a mother and father? Will you say the Bible condemns homosexual acts? The debate will be won by whomever conjures up the strongest emotions of sympathy in the audience. Therefore, unless you're an extraordinarily gifted and charismatic debater, you lose. And when you lose, millions of people out in TV land are pulled a few inches further away from common sense values and a few inches closer to embracing, or at least resigning themselves to accepting, same-sex marriage. The lesbian debater intentionally appeals to Americans' basic traits of tolerance, inclusiveness, fair-mindedness, and honor toward veterans. Every statement she makes tends to create in the viewer positive feelings, not toward same-sex marriage per se, but toward her. Yet, it's the viewer's attitudes toward same-sex marriage that will change. Each hidden persuasion is like money accruing into the emotional bank account of the listener. And when there are enough funds, that is, strong feelings of sympathy, in the listener's account, he or she has been persuaded of the justness of these two women being married. Let's rewind her sales pitch and watch how the feelings accumulate in the listener's bank account until they reach critical mass. "I love my country." Ka-ching, she's a patriot. "I obey its laws and I pay my taxes." Ka-ching, she's a responsible citizen. "I'm an American and have all the same rights you do." Ka-ching, she's appealing to fairness. "I've served my country in the military and have put my life on the line." Ka-ching, ka-ching, whoa, she's a veteran, double points. "I've lived monogamously with my partner for 18 years. Ka-ching, she's loyal and stable. "We truly love each other and want nothing more than to be married and to live out our lives in peace and happiness, just like you." Ka-ching, she's in love. Now imagine how the television viewers are reacting to this debate. Many of us find our feelings have been stirred by the lesbian's touching appeal. We like her. We want her to be happy. Our positive feelings toward her start to subtly eat away at our long-held conviction that same-sex marriage is wrong. Those warm emotions give rise to a stream of thought whispers that orbit our minds at light speed. Thoughts like these: maybe I've judged these people too harshly just because they're different. Maybe they could make each other happy if they were married. After all, heterosexual married couples have lots of problems and half of them get divorced. So what difference does it really make? We start to doubt our prior beliefs, wondering if they're as sacred as we've thought, or rather just some antiquated religious notions about sex and sin that don't really apply in today's world. Then the thought occurs to us, as though from divine revelation: don't we all just long to love and be loved? Maybe that is the ultimate truth. She's right. It doesn't hurt anyone else for her to be married to her partner. It's mean-spirited to deny other human beings their happiness. I like her. I want her to be happy. Besides, I don't want anyone to call me a bigot. Seduction complete. Now, If we were anchored in the Judeo-Christian moral standards that are responsible for the existence of Western civilization, all this emotional persuasion would be a joke. We'd easily discern the truth of the debate and just be amused at the feeble attempts to manipulate our feelings. But after several decades of public education that reflects not the values of the nation's founders, but those of 60s radicals and reformers, millions of Americans are just plain confused. The farther we stray from the rock of unchanging spiritual principles, the easier it is to get swept away by clever appeals to our feelings, including the need to prove to others that we are tolerant. Increasingly, that means we have to tolerate corruption or, in some cases, outright evil. There are no words to describe the stunning ease with which we have been seduced to throw away that which is most precious to us. In C.S. Lewis's 7-volume Chronicles of Narnia, the poignant and brilliantly insightful final book, The Last Battle, describes how the good-hearted but naive inhabitants of Narnia throw away their cherished civilization, losing both their lives and their world itself by falling for a shabby ruse perpetrated by a few cunning and unprincipled characters. When you read it, you can't help thinking, oh my gosh, this isn't even a very clever con game. It's crude, full of contradictions, and easily seen through. You just want to shake them and say, don't you see what you're falling for? Nevertheless, as the con men ruthlessly play on the doubts and fears of the Narnia folk, their lies take hold, and the light of civilization goes out. Haven't we in America done exactly the same thing? Look at the shabby ruse we've fallen for. We've traded Western civilization for vain delusions, cheap thrills, and laughably illogical doctrines. Like the townsfolk in The Emperor's New Clothes, we all know the king is wearing no clothes. We can plainly see the truth, but we play along out of fear and intimidation. We're afraid of confrontation, of losing the love and approval of others, of being labeled judgmental, racist, bigoted, or homophobic. So we quietly allow our minds to be twisted as we surrender our former beliefs and bequeath an unknown country to our children and grandchildren. How strange. Out of the thousands of years of suffering and oppression that comprise human history, a light burns brightly for just a couple of hundred years. The American experiment, a revolutionary idea that the common man can be free, master of his own government, so long as he himself is ruled by God. For a short time, this brilliant young country dazzles all the world and all of history, not just with its power and productivity and progress, but with its goodness. And then, out of pure hatred, the same rage and rebellion institutionalized in communism, Nazism, Islamism, and all the other isms that have plagued our world, haters of truth scheme to extinguish this shining light. So they concoct an absurd, fantastic ruse that animals should have the same rights as human beings, that white people are inherently racist and oppressive, that self-destructive sexual compulsions are perfectly normal and noble. Each passing year brings new and more bizarre delusions being held up as truth. How much stranger still that we've bought it. Toward the end of her life, my grandmother, Mary Capellion, wanted to go back to the old country, to travel overseas one last time to visit her long-lost relatives. I went with her, as her bodyguard, you might say. I will never forget the time I spent with her. I'll never forget her stories about what she and my father went through during the Armenian genocide, and I'll never forget what a survivor she was, to pick up the few shattered pieces of their lives and to come to America to start over. And I will never, ever forget the night we returned to the United States. Our plane from Athens arrived at New York's Kennedy Airport too late for us to make our connection to Washington, D.C., so Grandmom and I slept in the airport terminal that night in the second-floor lounge. We were both tired but very happy to be back in America. After a while, Grandmom shuffled off to the ladies' room. On her return, she described for me, her old woman's voice brimming with excitement, how everything in the restroom was so clean and shiny and modern, how there was hot and cold running water, how everything worked perfectly, so totally different from where we had just been. And she said she felt like kneeling down and kissing America, right there on the floor of the restroom of JFK Airport. So grateful was she for being back in the USA. My grandmother, who decades earlier, as a homeless, tempest-tossed immigrant, had found refuge in this generous land, had once more come home through the golden door. To this day, whether due to some special blessing from God or just because there's so much contrasting darkness throughout the rest of the world, America remains, despite unrelenting assaults by enemies within and without, the national light of the world. As we have seen, not everybody loves that light. But fortunately for me, Mary Capellian did.
And that was chapter 4 of The Marketing of Evil, How Radicals, Elitists, and Pseudo-Experts Sold Us Corruption Disguised as Freedom by David Capellian. And next week, chapter 5. Back in a minute. Thank you. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there, and reminding you that greed is not conservative.